Say, what is your favorite part of your body?
At 62 years old, Johnny Depp is no longer the untouchable heartthrob of the 90s or the eccentric blockbuster king of the 2000s. He's something else now, something that makes people stop in their tracks when they see him. Time has etched itself onto his face, but instead of fading into the background, Depp has become a living reminder of Hollywood's strange mix of beauty, chaos, and survival. For decades, he was the man everyone wanted to watch, whether he was playing a scissors-handed recluse, a candy-coated factory owner, or the most famous pirate in movie history. But behind the characters was a man whose real life was even more unpredictable than the films he starred in. The public has seen him skyrocket to unimaginable fame, crash under the weight of scandals, and somehow claw his way back into relevance when most thought it was impossible. And now, at 62, Johnny Depp doesn't just spark curiosity, he commands it. Every recent appearance sends tabloids scrambling for close-ups, and every cryptic comment he makes sparks entire news cycles. He's no longer chasing the spotlight, yet the spotlight refuses to let him go. But here's the part that makes jaws drop. Instead of hiding away, Depp has stepped into a new chapter, one that's confusing fans, enraging critics, and fascinating everyone in between. His latest projects, his shocking public statements, and the whispers about a Pirates of the Caribbean return have set off a frenzy of speculation. So what's the truth about Johnny Depp today? What's driving him, and where is this unpredictable journey heading? To answer that, you have to step into the messy, fascinating world of a man who refuses to disappear, even when Hollywood tried to erase him. Before we dive deeper, make sure you hit subscribe. There's a lot more coming your way. After years of turbulence, Johnny Depp's return to the big screen didn't come through a franchise juggernaut or a studio-backed blockbuster. It came in the most unexpected way, through independent films that seemed designed less for money and more for meaning. For a man who once carried billion-dollar hits, stepping back into the industry this way looked like both a gamble and a quiet declaration. He wasn't done, but he wasn't playing by the old rules anymore. The first step in that comeback was Jean du Barry, the French historical drama where Depp took on the role of King Louis XV. The choice raised eyebrows instantly. Here was a Hollywood icon once synonymous with eccentric blockbusters, now playing French royalty in a European film. When it premiered at Cannes, the reception was unforgettable. Depp received a standing ovation that stretched for nearly 7 minutes, with cameras capturing him visibly emotional, eyes damp as the crowd roared. For his fans, it felt like vindication, a triumphant return to the world stage. But the critics weren't as generous. Some praised his understated performance, noting it was a far cry from the over-the-top antics of his past roles. Others dismissed the film entirely, calling it uneven, even accusing it of leaning too heavily on Depp's name to sell tickets. Still, the buzz around Cannes proved something important. Johnny Depp's presence was still an event. Even his skeptics had to admit that his name alone could dominate headlines in a way few actors of his generation still could. And he didn't stop there. Depp moved on to Day Drinker, a psychological thriller now in production, co-starring Penelope Cruz and Madeline Klein, a rising star best known for her breakout role in Outer Banks. The casting itself was telling. Pairing Depp with an Oscar winner like Cruz showed that established talent still wanted to work with him, while introducing him alongside a younger face like Klein signaled he wasn't just clinging to the past, he was stepping into a story that might bridge generations of moviegoers. Unlike the fantastical worlds of Pirates or Alice in Wonderland, Day Drinker is said to be grounded, intimate, and tense, a claustrophobic drama rather than a spectacle. Insiders suggest Depp was drawn to its quiet intensity, a script that demanded restraint instead of extravagance. It seemed like the perfect metaphor for where he was in life, no longer swinging from chandeliers, but digging into something deeper, slower, and far more human, and maybe that's what fascinates people most about this phase of his career. Depp's indie choices aren't about chasing global box office glory. They're about rebuilding, about proving he still has the range and presence that once made him Hollywood's most unpredictable actor. To his most loyal fans, this feels like a renaissance, a stripped-back return to the craft that made him great before Jack Sparrow ever swaggered across the screen. But just when it seemed like Depp was finally rewriting his story on his own terms, a single phrase pulled him back into the storm he'd worked so hard to escape. Just as Johnny Depp seemed to be carving out a quieter path in cinema, he made a statement that dragged him straight back into the chaos. In an interview, he referred to himself as a crash test dummy for the Me Too movement. It was a phrase that landed like a thunderclap, provocative, unapologetic, and instantly controversial. The response was explosive. Supporters rallied around him, saying the remark captured what they had long believed, that Depp had been singled out, scrutinized more harshly than others, and treated as a public experiment in judgment. They filled social media with defenses, arguing that after years of headlines and legal battles, he had every right to point out the toll it took on his life and career. But critics saw it very differently. To them, Depp's words didn't sound like insight. They sounded dismissive, as if he were reframing an entire cultural reckoning as nothing more than a personal attack. Articles poured in from major outlets condemning the comment, calling it reckless, even dangerous. Some argued that by casting himself as a victim of the movement, Depp risked erasing the voices of people who had come forward at great personal cost. The split was stark. On one side, his fans, loyal and unshakable, cheered his defiance and saw it as proof that he refused to be silenced. On the other, his critics sharpened their knives, insisting that Hollywood could never fully embrace him again. The divide highlighted a strange truth. Johnny Depp had become more than just an actor. He was now a symbol, a lightning rod in a culture still wrestling with how to balance accountability with redemption. And here's what makes it so striking. Depp didn't walk back his words. He didn't apologize, didn't try to soften the blow. Instead, he leaned into the idea, painting Hollywood as an industry that had used him as a test case, a warning shot, a way to measure how far public opinion could stretch. For his fans, this raw honesty was refreshing, a reminder of the man who never played by Hollywood's script. For his detractors, it was proof that he hadn't learned a thing. What no one could deny was the impact. Overnight, Depp was back in the headlines, not because of his films, but because of the weight of his words. And in a strange way, that controversy became part of his reinvention. He was no longer just returning as an actor, he was returning as a survivor of the very system that had once crowned him its king. Still, one question loomed larger than all the others. If he was this defiant, could Hollywood really trust him again with the role that made him an icon? For millions of fans, Johnny Depp is forever Captain Jack Sparrow, the eccentric rum-soaked trickster who staggered across the screen and transformed a theme park ride into one of the most successful franchises in cinema history. It wasn't just a role, it was a reinvention of the swashbuckler archetype, and it earned Depp an Academy Award nomination, along with paychecks that made him one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. Jack Sparrow wasn't just a character, he was a cultural phenomenon. So when Disney began distancing itself from Depp in the wake of his controversies, the outrage was immediate. Rumors of a reboot without him spread like wildfire, and the very idea of a Sparrowless Pirates film sparked global backlash. Petitions demanding his return gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. On social media, hashtags trended for weeks, filled with fans declaring that the franchise simply could not survive without its captain. For a time, it seemed the chapter was closed. Disney remained silent, and Hollywood insiders whispered that Depp's association with the brand had ended for good. But then came the twist no one expected. Jerry Bruckheimer, the legendary producer who helped launch the Pirates series, hinted in interviews that the door wasn't completely shut. If the right script came along, he suggested, Depp could indeed return. That single suggestion sent shockwaves through the industry. Suddenly, conversations about Jack Sparrow weren't about the past, they were about possibility. Could Depp, after everything, step back into the boots of his most iconic role? Would Disney take the gamble, betting that audiences cared more about nostalgia than controversy? The idea is tantalizing for everyone involved. For Disney, it would mean reviving one of their most profitable franchises with the one actor who made it magic. For Depp, it would be more than just another paycheck. It would be vindication, a chance to reclaim the character that defined his career on his own terms. Yet the risks are enormous. Returning could cement his legacy as the definitive Jack Sparrow, or it could risk diluting it if the film fails to capture the same lightning in a bottle. And then there's the matter of pride. Would Depp even want to go back to a studio that once turned its back on him? Would he see it as redemption or as a step backward? What makes this question so gripping is that it's bigger than one movie. It's about whether Hollywood is willing to forgive and whether audiences are willing to separate the man from the myth. One thing is certain, the whispers about Sparrow's return aren't dying down. If anything, they're growing louder. And if Johnny Depp does hoist the sails of the Black Pearl once more, it won't just be another sequel. It would be one of the most dramatic comebacks in movie history. But while fans argue about Jack Sparrow's future, Depp himself is revealing something far more personal, a glimpse into the mind of a man who's lived on both sides of fame. Behind the glare of cameras and the chaos of scandals lies a man who has always seemed strangely out of place in Hollywood. Even during his meteoric rise, Johnny Depp admitted that fame felt like a costume he could never quite take off. Now, at 62, those old confessions carry even more weight. He no longer pretends to be comfortable in the spotlight. In fact, he often admits he prefers to be anywhere but the center of attention. Those who know him best say he spends much of his time in Europe, tucked away in sprawling estates far from Los Angeles. There, he paints for hours at a time, producing vivid portraits and surreal images that often find their way into galleries. His art isn't a hobby, it's a window into the turbulence of his mind. Each canvas carries a mix of darkness and beauty, a reflection of the man himself. Music has been just as central to his identity. Long before he was a movie star, Depp was a guitarist, and that passion has never left him. With his band Hollywood Vampires, formed alongside legends like Alice Cooper and Joe Perry, he's taken the stage across the world, channeling the same restless energy that made him magnetic on screen. Audiences often say that when Depp is playing music, he looks more at peace than he ever does in interviews or film premieres. It's as if music allows him to disappear into something purer, something untouched by the noise of his reputation. This side of Depp fascinates his fans. They see not just an actor, but a restless creator, someone who refuses to be confined to a single box. Painting, music, acting, they're all outlets for a man who has spent decades searching for meaning in an industry that so often thrives on emptiness. But even with these creative escapes, Depp has never shied away from admitting the toll that fame has taken. He's spoken of betrayal by people he once trusted, of the loneliness that lingers even when surrounded by millions of admirers. He has described Hollywood as both a gift and a curse, a world that made him a star but left him questioning who he really was once the cameras stopped rolling, and maybe that's why his recent performances feel so different. They aren't just roles, they're extensions of his inner struggles. There's less of the manic energy that once defined Jack Sparrow, and more of a quiet, almost haunted intensity. It's the work of a man who has been scarred, but who refuses to let those scars define his ending. At 62, Depp isn't chasing applause anymore. He's searching for something deeper, whether through a guitar riff, a brushstroke, or a character on screen. And that search might be the most compelling chapter of his story yet. But the real question is, where does that search lead him now? Johnny Depp's future is a puzzle that even Hollywood insiders can't quite solve. At 62, most actors would be easing into retirement, but Depp shows no sign of stepping back. Instead, he's walking a razor's edge between two very different worlds, the small intimate sphere of independent cinema and the dazzling, high-stakes arena of global franchises. On one hand, his current trajectory suggests he's leaning toward artistry over fame. Daydrinker signals a man searching for depth, and his passion for painting and music points to someone who may prefer the slower, more personal rewards of creativity. If this is the path he takes, Depp could reinvent himself as a serious auteur, a figure respected not for box office dominance, but for bold choices and unapologetic self-expression. On the other hand, whispers of a Pirates of the Caribbean return refuse to die down. For every indie script on his desk, there are fans begging for one more voyage as Jack Sparrow. Should he accept, it would be more than just another movie. It would be the kind of cultural reset few actors ever get, a chance to rewrite his ending in the brightest spotlight of them all. There's also the possibility that Depp charts a middle course. With his band Hollywood Vampires still active and his growing reputation in the art world, he could continue to blur the lines between performer, painter, and musician, refusing to be pinned down to just one identity. This version of Depp feels almost poetic, a restless spirit constantly searching, constantly transforming. Whatever path he takes, one thing is certain: Johnny Depp is not finished, and the world, whether it cheers or criticizes, is still watching. But before you decide where you think this story ends, there's one final truth to consider about Johnny Depp today. Johnny Depp at 62 is not the same man who once ruled Hollywood's red carpets. He carries more scars now, both visible and invisible, and yet those scars have become part of his legend. His story is no longer just about fame, fortune, and blockbuster roles. It's about resilience, reinvention, and the stubborn refusal to disappear when the world has tried again and again to count him out. Some see him as a fallen idol, clinging to relevance in an industry that moves faster than ever. Others see him as a survivor, someone who endured storms that would have ended most careers and somehow walked out on the other side. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, but one thing is undeniable. Johnny Depp still fascinates us, even when we don't fully understand him. At this age, most actors are remembered for what they once were. Depp, however, is still writing new chapters, some controversial, some brilliant, and all unpredictable. Whether he chooses indie films, a return to the seas as Captain Jack, or a life dedicated to music and art, he remains one of the few stars whose presence alone can shift the conversation. So, when you see Johnny Depp today at 62, you may gasp at how time has reshaped him. But you'll also realize that he's not a relic of the past. He's a reminder that true icons never fade. They evolve, they provoke, and they stay with us, long after the credits roll. If this kept you watching, subscribe now, and check out our next video waiting for you, packed with even more shocking Hollywood stories.